What's going on YouTube? Geosna right here. So in today's video we're going to talk about iOS 11.3.1 downgrades, some great news about that, and also how the process actually works. Because I have seen a lot of videos online about the process itself, but nobody actually explains why sometimes you cannot downgrade even though you have the blobs saved. So I'm going to start with the good news coming from Pound2Owned. A few days ago he said, quote, successfully future restored or pretty much downgraded an iPad Air 2 to iOS 11.3.1 using the iOS 11.4.1 SEP. Now this is something very important because iOS 11.3.1 is not signed. If you take a look in here, you can see that iOS 11.3.1 not signed anymore. iOS 11.4.1 is the only version that is currently signed, and if you're able to downgrade to iOS 11.3.1 using iOS 11.4.1's SEP, this means that the SEP is compatible with iOS 11.3.1. Now, with that being said, Pound2Owned has actually checked with iPad Air 2. The compatibility may stay true for other devices as well. If you want, you can check that out on a spare device. Anyways, why is this important? Why there has to be a compatibility? And why I have to use iOS 11.4.1's SEP? And what is SEP in the first place? So these are a lot of questions that nobody seems to want to answer in the videos about how to downgrade or about downgrades. So I'm going to try to do that, even with the assumed risk of boring you to hell. So if you want to learn more about the process of downgrades and how they work and why sometimes you can't do it, I'm going to tell you in the next minute. So before we do that, I would like to tell you that if you want to downgrade right now, or whatever, to upgrade from an older version to iOS 11.3.1 using iOS 11.4.1 SEP, you can. And there is this web page in here called iOS 11.3.1 Downgrade. Link will be in the description down below. And you can check your device in here. And for example, we have iPad Air 2 that Pound2Owned mentioned here. And you have all the requirements, the file that you have to download. If you're on iOS 10, you get this nonce setter. If you're on iOS 11, you get this one. Then you have the downgrade files, the SEP, the build manifest, and then you have the future restore for macOS or for Windows 64-bit. And here you have some instructions on how to fix various errors, for example, illegal instruction 4. And then you have the setup, how to put your files in which folders, and then the instructions on how to do it. So if you want to perform a downgrade, and this is why I came to this video, this is how you do it. These are the files you need, and these are the instructions. Now, with that being said, let me explain why sometimes, even though you have your blobs saved, you can't downgrade. So this is a problem. For example, if I want to go from iOS 11.4.1 to iOS 11.3.1, I cannot do that. Why? Well, as you can see in here on these requirements, there has to be a nonce setter so that I can set the nonce and perform the downgrade. In my blobs, inside my sh2 blobs that I save when a version is actually signed, there is something called a generator. I have to set that generator in the memory of the phone for the device to actually create a string of characters at boot time that would match my blob and therefore would allow me to downgrade even though the iOS 11.3.1 is not signed. However, that nonce setter that sets the thing in a memory requires special permissions to do that. And iOS 11.4.1 doesn't have the exploit that is required for such a tool to be created. So if you want to go from iOS 11.4.1 to iOS 11.3.1, you can't. And this is why, because there is no exploit that has the ability to set in the memory that string that you need to set before you can downgrade. But if you want to go, for example, from iOS 11.2.6 to iOS 11.3.1, or from iOS 10 or even iOS 9 to iOS 11.3.1, because I don't know, you want to run a newer version with the Electra jailbreak, or your applications no longer work because you're running an old jailbreak and an old iOS version, then you can. So why Pound2Owned mentioned iOS 11.4.1 in here? Normally, even if you have the blobs, you still need to get some components from the latest signed version, which currently happens to be 11.4.1. And the iOS version you're trying to downgrade to, and the iOS 11.4.1, for example, in this case, or the latest version, have to have the SEP and the baseband, if it applies, compatible. And this is the trick. For example, let me give you a scenario. If I'm running iOS 11.1 and I'm jailbroken and I'm able to set the nonce in the memory, but I want to go to iOS 11.2, even though I have the blobs and I can set the nonce in the memory, I still cannot downgrade. Why? Well, the iOS 11.4.1 SEP and baseband are not compatible this way with iOS 11.2 because iOS 11.2 is too old. It's, as you can see, many versions away, and the modifications that have been done to the SEP of iOS 11.4.1 and the baseband are no longer compatible, and if they're not compatible, the restore will fail. And this is why you cannot go far back. For example, I get a lot of questions why I cannot downgrade to iOS 10 from iOS 11 if I'm running iOS 11.3.1, for example. I'm jailbroken, I have the blobs for iOS 10, and I have the nonce setter, and I set the nonce in the memory. Well, that's why, because in order to downgrade to iOS 10, you would need to use iOS 11.4.1's SEP and baseband, and they're far, far away from each other, so it's not compatible. iOS 11.3.1 is not that far away, so it's still compatible, you can still do it, but I assume that the next version will break the compatibility, the same way that iOS 11.3.x broke the compatibility with iOS 11.2. And this is why you can't downgrade sometimes, even if you have the blobs, you're jailbroken, you have the nonce setter, and so on. So that's an important thing. But who is the SEP and who is the baseband? Well, the SEP, or Secure Enclave Processor, is a very important component found in any 64-bit iPhone, iPad, or iPod Touch, and of course that is responsible for handling decryption, encryption, passcodes, key bags, keychains, I don't know, your Face ID, your Touch ID, and all that gunk. So anything related to the security of your phone is handled by this Secure Enclave Processor, which has its own operating system called SEP-OS. It's using a Kingfisher ARM core, and it's actually very, very powerful. It's running on an operating system called, as I said, SEP-OS, which is actually completely separated from the iOS itself. You know, iOS sends SEP-OS commands and SEP-OS returns data, but other than that, the user doesn't have any control over it. So yeah, this presentation here by Tarjimand, Matthew Solnick, and David Wong is actually very good. It's from 2016. Some things may have changed, but it's still a very good presentation on how that SEP works and how the data is actually stored, encrypted, decrypted, transferred, and so on. The SEP uses a message box or mailbox style, so everything that is being sent to the SEP has to be filtered through that. Anyways, there's a lot of things that you need to know about this, but I would definitely recommend you to take a look at this. But anyways, what you need to know is that this handles anything related to the security on your phone, including Touch ID and Face ID. So if you're trying to restore this component, which is part of the IPSW of the firmware, with an incompatible version, it will definitely wreak havoc. Then you have the baseband. Well, this one also has to be compatible if your device uses one, and the only devices that do not have a baseband chip are the iPod Touches, because they do not have cellular capabilities, and the iPad's Wi-Fi, which do not have cellular capabilities. Then all the iPhones and Apple Watches with cellular capabilities and iPads with cellular capabilities have a baseband device, and this is pretty much what manages the connection, the antenna, the connection, the SIM card, and stuff like that. Everything related to the antenna is handled by this. The Wi-Fi and Bluetooth are not handled by the baseband, they're handled by the main CPU. So yeah, the iPod Touch, for example, doesn't need one. So you can say that the iPod Touch users are a little bit more fortunate because they do not have to have a compatible baseband, but they still have to have a compatible SEP, so yeah. Anyways, this is pretty much it about the downgrades. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and I really hope this explains why sometimes downgrades are impossible, why you can't downgrade from iOS 11.4.1 to iOS 11.3 right now, and of course, why sometimes, even if you have the blobs, you can't downgrade. So thank you for watching, I'm GeoSnow, peace out.